Hi, this is Adrian, and I'm just here because I'd like to share a point with regards to the way that our world, our reality, current events are presented in the news and media. I'm bringing up this point because in Canada, recently I've watched a fair bit of news on the television, CTV, CBC, all the major news networks. And I notice a very interesting point about the way news and current events are presented. The way that information is, the delivery and presentation of information is controlled is not so much with regards to what we are shown and what we are not shown. Although having said that, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff that we're simply not shown, while there's many things that we should be seeing and hearing about that we simply don't. However, that is one of the more, call it traditional and outright forms in which information is controlled, and that the way people view things and perceive things is controlled, brainwashing essentially. But one of the more, call it modern ways that this is done is rather through presenting information that is real, that is factual, real current events, hard-hitting news, but doing so in a way where the information is presented in a way that is justified as being unbiased and objective and that kind of thing. But in fact, what's actually being done is that when something happens or there's an issue, a current event, things are merely presented very matter-of-factly, and it's like, this happened today, without ever actually giving any information or detail or real in-depth background and investigation into how did these things come about. Investigative journalism is something that in our Western media is really dying off, if it hasn't already. The very little bit of it that there is tends to be very shallow and never get deep into the larger political, economic, socioeconomic establishments and structures, systems that create the issues that are then just outflows of these systems that are then reported on the news. And additionally to not showing, the history of how certain things are created, how problems are in our society created, they tend to never present the other side of that, which is, where is this going, and what are the real, what is the real extent of the implications of these issues? What are the real consequences? That side of things is also very little, if at all, investigated in any real depth. Let alone, considering, what could we do about this? If this is a problem, what are some potential solutions? Because of course, if how the problem is created is never really presented and investigated in real depth, how could we possibly present any forms of solutions to such problems and issues? And what this is doing on a deeper psychological level is presenting things in a way where it's like, shit just happens, this just happens because no greater context into how these things come about is ever presented or shown. On a more tacit and implicit level, it's as though we're presenting our reality and current events in a way where things are out of our control, as if there is no starting point, as if there is no source from which these things are being created. And this naturally is going to create quite a bit of hopelessness in people. Now, I'm not saying that hope per se is the solution. I would say that actually, taking real practical actions is the solution. But I mean hopelessness in terms of, if you're not actually shown in a way that will educate you as to how these things are created and thus how we can solve them, then you're simply not being supported effectively to see, how, for instance, how am I contributing to this problem? How am I a part of this? How does this all work? And therefore, how can we then work out a solution? How can I be part of the solution? What can I do? So this whole, and again, this is all justified within the idea of it all being subjective or objective, because apparently if you were to show the real causes of these things, then you end up implicating certain people or institutions or whatever it is as being factors, as being causes, as being essentially part of the problem. And of course, we could never do that unless it's maybe somebody out there far away that, we can afford to pick a problem with, or it serves somebody's special interest to pick a problem with, pick a fight with. But since when is it objective to simply not state the facts, even if it does imply that certain people, or we as all members of society, for instance, are part of the problem, I mean, objective and subjective, or sorry, objective should mean factual, including everybody, implicating everybody in all things, all points that are part of the problems that we see and face. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that our news and our media has become ballless, completely ballless. And I mean, without realizing this, that this is, how that presenting things in this way, how this is shaping people's certain mentality and outlook on life. And then if you actually go and investigate, see why is it being presented this way? Who is it that is controlling our information sources? If this is not sort of investigated and realized, then this is going to have serious consequences for us as individuals and as a society. And I see it happen. I see how people who subscribe to this stuff, read their paper on a daily basis, read their news on a daily basis, and always remain limited to and subject to the official sources of information, become jaded, become complacent, become blame artists, pointing the finger at politicians or whatever it is has become like our national pastime as Canadians or Westerners for that matter. And the fact is that there's no excuse for this, considering the fact that we have the internet, we have alternative news sources, we as Westerners have access to these things. The only thing that's keeping us from actually expanding our perspectives on these things is perhaps this fear that I mentioned to look at things actually objectively, where it might actually implicate some people, some things, perhaps even ourselves as individuals in a society. because we're too shit scared to see these things. You know, the other side of that, of only subscribing to mainstream media, is that it's all very safe and warm and fuzzy and PG rated as a result of never actually getting into the nitty gritty details of things. And this is where, you know, again, on a deeper, more psychological level, we will tend to trust these sources more and feel more comfortable with them, and basically always come crawling back to mama and papa, because that's where we feel safe. And we don't have to get too deep into the reality of things and how things work. But, you know, this is just ignorance, and ignorance is not bliss. As a society, we're going to begin finding this out more and more as things, as we continue to ignore the real problems and things continue to deteriorate to a point where everybody becomes affected, and nobody within our society is safe anymore, because things just get so fucked up from having ignored the problem for so long and refused to basically look outside of the mainstream sources, to think outside of the box. We are sowing our own end with our fear and constant state of denial that we're living in, that has become normal. Every day, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock news. That's why most people, probably a lot of people anyway, may not even understand what I'm saying, or maybe might not have even noticed before what I'm pointing out here. So that's all for now. I suggest that we all put on our thinking caps and investigate all things, so that we as individuals can make real decisions with clarity and with all the facts, and no longer limit ourselves to this world where it's like we're just observers watching the world burn before our eyes and becoming angry and frustrated because we as individuals are actually doing nothing about it, because we believe that we can do nothing about it. There's a reason why people think this way, why people are actually conditioned and led to believe things in this way. Thank you very much.